Hello and welcome to the Global BIM Summit pre-event series. My name is Adam Matthews and I lead the international programme at the Centre for Digital Built Britain. I'm delighted to be your host for today's session, which has been made possible by the UK's Construction Innovation Hub and the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. Today's webinar is held in both English and Spanish, and you should see at the bottom of your screen the option to choose your language preference. The session will be recorded, so you'll be able to refer back to it, and we'll make that all available after the Global BIM Summit on the 17th of March, next Wednesday. So let's begin. Building information modeling, known as BIM, is at the heart of the digital transformation of the global construction sector. Governments around the world are transforming the way infrastructure is designed, built, operated, implemented, and all of this is to improve social, economic, and environmental outcomes for people and places. Today is the fourth in a series of webinars where we're hearing from the public sector, from multilateral representatives that are leading these national BIM initiatives around the world. We'll be hearing about their experiences on national policies and programs and hearing about what's driving their initiatives, especially on this digital transformation agenda. These four webinars are part of a background to the global event, which will be running next Wednesday on the 17th of March. This global event is all about an international dialogue around the collaboration between governments, and in particular how we can help to encourage this digital transformation, of course. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers. So I'm going to ask if our speakers can turn their cameras on. I would like to introduce them to you all. So first of all, we have representing the United Nations Ops is Nihal Munoz. Representing the European Commission, we have Electra Papadaki. And representing the LATAM network of governments with regards to BIM, of course, is Carolina Soto. And lastly, we have representing the Inter-American Development Bank, Claudia Suasnavar. Hi to all of you speakers, and we'll be seeing you very shortly after your presentations for the Q&A. Thank you very much, and you can turn your cameras off now. Thank you. As I said, we're going to be hearing individually from each of the speakers about their own initiatives and what they're working on, what some of their challenges are, what's driving their initiatives, and then we'll have a Q&A, a discussion with them individually. Now, we are running a Slido activity as well during this session so that we can hear from you. We're going to be inviting you to respond to 2 polls that we'll be running through the session, but also you can add your questions in there as well, or propose some questions into the Slido chat. We do have a very limited amount of time at the end of the session for Q&A, so we will try and pick 1 or 2 of those questions that come through. So thank you, and we look forward to that session at the end. And now, first of all, I'm pleased to hand over to Nihal to hear about the UN Ops and their perspective on the introduction of BIM. Thanks, Nihal.
Muy buenos días, tardes o noches. Espero que todas y todos ustedes estén bien y con salud. Soy Nigel Muñoz, asesor regional de gestión de proyectos para América Latina y el Caribe en UNOPS. Y hoy tengo el placer de hacer una breve presentación como parte de estas sesiones previas al lanzamiento de la red global BIM la próxima semana. Antes que nada, ¿quiénes somos? UNOPS es el acrónico para United Nations Office for Project Services. La Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas nos define como el recurso central del Sistema de Naciones Unidas para la gestión de las adquisiciones y los contratos públicos, así como para las obras públicas y el desarrollo de infraestructura física, incluidas las actividades conexas de fortalecimiento de capacidades. Nuestra misión consiste en ayudar a las personas a mejorar sus condiciones de vida y a los países a lograr la paz y un desarrollo sostenible. Solo en el 2019 implementamos proyectos humanitarios de desarrollo y consolidación de la paz y seguridad por un valor superior a los 2.300 millones de dólares. Contamos con una presencia global, con operaciones en más de 80 países y trabajamos tanto con gobiernos centrales y locales, donantes y organismos multilaterales tales como el Banco Mundial, el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, Banco Asiático de Desarrollo, la Comisión Europea, entre otros. Además de brindar servicios personalizados a nuestros asociados y contrapartes, contamos con líneas especializadas de servicio en distintas modalidades, a través de asistencia técnica, implementación, proyectos transaccionales y proyectos de inversión. Más allá del apoyo que brindamos a nuestros asociados, ya sea actuando como asesor estratégico, apoyo técnico o gestionando un proyecto complejo, añadimos valor de varias formas. Una es promoviendo una gestión pública justa y equitativa a través de la implementación de las mejores prácticas internacionales y nacionales. Volveremos a ese punto en unos instantes. Generando valor e impacto positivo en ahorros de los recursos públicos, la calidad de las obras y la gestión de las adquisiciones públicas. También generamos valor apoyando la implementación de reformas organizacionales y mejora en las entidades públicas. Y por último, contribuyendo a alcanzar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible de la Agenda 2030. Específicamente en infraestructura, UNOPS agrega valor mediante el uso de estándares internacionales, como habíamos mencionado. Incorporamos elementos de sostenibilidad y resiliencia en todos nuestros proyectos. También consideramos la perspectiva de género, diversidad e inclusión a la hora de planificar, implementar y entregar nuestros proyectos. Esto nos lleva al contexto específico de nuestra región de América Latina y el Caribe. Según un estudio realizado por el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo en el 2018, entre los años 2008 y 2017, el promedio anual de inversión en infraestructura fue del 3.5% del Producto Interno Bruto regional. Estudios estiman que entre un 10 y un 25% del valor de los contratos públicos en la región se pierde anualmente por causa de casos de corrupción. Lógicamente, esto se traduce en un perjuicio a la provisión y la sostenibilidad de estos bienes públicos. Las prácticas corruptas generan importantes sobrecostos, paralizaciones de obras, asignaciones inadecuadas de recursos, precios inflados y cuellos de botella en la gestión de los proyectos públicos. Lastimosamente, en casi la mitad de los países de América Latina hay investigaciones en marcha por corrupción en proyectos de obras públicas. En este contexto, UNOPS promueve la gestión pública justa y equitativa, centrado en el suministro del valor sostenible y está compuesto de varios aspectos que incluyen la eficiencia, el trabajo con el sector público, la excelencia en los servicios públicos, la integridad y transparencia en todas nuestras acciones, la incorporación de la equidad de género y diversidad, y como último, pero no menos importante, el uso de la innovación y tecnología en nuestros proyectos. El uso de nuevas tecnologías, tales como el BIM, fortalece la gestión de los recursos públicos que permiten la transparencia y dotan de herramientas para el control social y la comunicación directa con el gobierno. Estos conceptos los hemos podido comprobar con resultados tangibles en algunos proyectos en los que hemos aplicado de alguna manera u otra la tecnología BIM. Específicamente en América Latina y el Caribe, trabajamos para introducir de forma personalizada el uso de BIM en nuestros proyectos de infraestructura pública. Hemos visto que para ello es de suma importancia realizar un estudio de las condiciones del mercado local en el que se implementará el proyecto e incorporar desde la etapa de planificación, inclusive antes del desarrollo del diseño, qué tanto podemos incluir y exigir de los suplidores del mercado local. Llámense los diseñadores, contratistas, el personal público y de las entidades públicas y los operadores del BIM. Esto para garantizar una competencia justa y aprovechar la oportunidad para incrementar las capacidades de todos los actores cuando sea necesario. Ya sea desde un proyecto de asesoría técnica para elaborar un análisis de brechas y una hoja de ruta para implementar una política BIM en un ministerio de obras públicas, hasta mejorar la calidad, eficiencia y transparencia de la gestión de un proyecto en específico. Nuestros aportes y acciones han resultado en el incremento de las capacidades técnicas del personal de nuestros clientes y una mayor transparencia y credibilidad del público en general. Con estas experiencias positivas y siendo UNOPS una entidad global, estamos convencidos de que un mecanismo de colaboración global, tal como lo es la red global BIM, trae muchos beneficios y tiene mucho potencial a distintos niveles y actores, desde el personal técnico, empresas de diseño y contratistas, pasando por los departamentos de adquisición y operación y mantenimiento de los bienes de las entidades públicas. Otros beneficios incluyen una reducción de tiempo en la curva de aprendizaje en la implementación de políticas BIM, tanto a nivel de entidades públicas como a nivel nacional. También se pueden beneficiar los grupos de trabajo nacionales o regionales que impulsan el uso de esta tecnología. Se incrementan las capacidades al reducir la brecha de conocimiento y tecnología entre los sectores público y privado. Como sabemos, el sector privado, por lo general, y en base a nuestra experiencia, va 2 o 3 pasos más adelante que el sector público. Es una oportunidad para crear sinergias y compartir lecciones aprendidas con otras instituciones y latitudes. Y también consideramos que es una excelente plataforma para aumentar la contribución a alcanzar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible de la Agenda 2030. Con esto termino mi breve exposición. Estamos muy emocionados en UNOPS de poder participar en esta iniciativa y estamos a su entera disposición. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Nihal. That was really helpful to hear your perspective on the value of collaboration, the value of assessing the market conditions. I was really interested in your point around the idea of assessing market conditions so that there's not a discrimination between the market itself and what's being asked of them. This was very interesting, and you mentioned, of course, also about encouraging transparency and improving not only the capacity of the private sector but also improving the capacity of the public sector. So I look forward to our discussion afterwards after our presentations now. Thank you. So now I would like to hand over to Electra and hear about how the European Commission has been encouraging digital into the construction sector. Thank you, Electra.
Thanks a lot to the organizers of the Global BIM Summit and particularly Adam Matthews for having me here today. My name is Electra Papadaki. I'm Policy Officer for the Digitalization of Construction and the Sustainability of the Built Environment in the European Commission. The European Commission supports the adoption of BIM in public procurement and by the industry. An important milestone is the Public Procurement Directive of 2014. There, the use of digital means, such as building information modeling, is suggested when it comes to procurement for construction. This public procurement directive becomes also the basis for the European Commission to start collaborating actively with the EU BIM Task Group, which is a European group of public procurers for construction coming from different EU member states, often in level that is ministerial or governmental agencies or other public entities that are responsible for drawing policy in this area and of course managing public immobiliary. As a result of this collaboration comes the EU Handbook for the Introduction of BIM in Public Procurement, available in many different languages in the website of the EU BIM Task Group. That is the basis of this EU framework of the adoption of BIM by the different member states. The handbook was well recognized and widely adopted. Indicatively, it was downloaded 54,000 times since 2017 that it was published. And it is indeed the first step of a common understanding for BIM in the EU. Based on the handbook, we performed trainings for public procurers in different member states. And as a continuation of that, we are developing now a new tool that will be of use for the different public procurers in the field across the EU. It will be a model for a cost-benefit analysis that can have EU-wide application and that will allow all different people involved in the procuring for construction see what are the costs and benefits, monetary and non-monetary, for a single project from the perspective of the public entity. And this is very important because first of all, it helps the member states that are not so advanced in adopting BIM to really build a case for that. But it is also the first concrete way in EU level that can be applicable to all countries that helps indeed calculate the benefits of BIM in individual project basis, because until now we have a lot of general numbers of the benefits of BIM, but not so much basis on seeing the benefits in one single project. Apart from EU level action, we are working directly with member states when needed for them to adopt structural reforms in order to introduce BIM, but also in general digitalize and modernize the construction. Digitalizing construction from the side again of the public administration means a series of other initiatives that can go to digitalizing the registry systems, the permit systems and others, or even the educational systems. And now, in the context of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the facility that is meant to support the member states to recover from the economic shock of the pandemic, the member states submit national plans that aim, among others, to digitalize and modernize public administration. Last and not least comes the support to the industry itself, first of all through research and innovation, through Horizon 2020, the very famous program of the EU for research and innovation. About 60 projects in the area of construction and buildings and innovation were funded of several millions of euros, and these projects looked into different ways of modernizing construction, but also different ways of applying BIM for circular economy or for energy efficiency or find innovative ways of training the workers and all the workforce for construction in using different tools and technologies. More support will be available particularly to SMEs through the new Digital Euro program that will offer also the opportunity for different companies to experiment and test new tools and technologies. Currently, the key strategy, the main strategy for construction and buildings in EU level is the renovation wave, which was announced in October 2020. In terms of digital construction, the renovation wave builds and proposes on the areas that I talked to you about already previously and identifies different areas of action. Apart from the wider adoption of BIM, it mentions the support to SMEs and of the whole construction ecosystem to deliver this transformation in the built environment, but also speaks about the digitalization of building permits that has started across many European member states, but not all yet. And lastly, it speaks about the development and implementation of digital building logbooks in a unified European framework. The digital building logbooks are the common repositories for all building-related data that are the tool that will bring together data available for buildings and the built environment in general that we have in public registries or we have under other tools such as the energy performance certificates or the renovation roadmaps, or we have data in different parts that can be the municipality, that can be different public authorities or the owners themselves, and make them accessible through a single gateway that will be the logbook. So that will be a future initiative that, of course, has a lot of interconnections with building information modeling, but brings something that is very important for the future of the European industry and the European construction sector, that is the data availability and the use of data. Now, what are our challenges in all this action? Of course, digitalization should happen in fair terms and no one should be left behind. That is why the past and the future include the support to small and medium-sized enterprises. Also, digitalization should be for the sake of greater good. It shouldn't be a goal by itself. Digitalization is what can help us have more transparency and trust when we are using public money, and it can lead to more informed decision making through all of this data that becomes available. And in the end, of course, digitalization of construction is serving the European Green Deal, this very big commitment and orientation of the current Commission. In the context of the recovery of the pandemic, the digital transition should, together with the green transition, help as well the European economy and society recover. Thank you very much for your attention and your time, and I will be very happy to answer any questions you might have in the Q&A session.
Thank you, Electra. Thanks very much. That was really interesting, especially what you were saying about digital being vital to the recovery from the pandemic and how it is a centerpiece of some of what the European Commission is working on with regards to the Green Deal and renovation and skills development. So clearly an important agenda for you in Europe. Thanks very much. And again, we'll try and get to some of those points that you raised because they're all really good ones in the Q&A in a moment or two. Now I'd like to hand over to Carolina Soto. Carolina leads the network of governments in Latin America on the BIM agenda, and we'll look forward to hearing your presentation. Thanks, Carolina.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Carolina Soto, soy la presidenta de la Red BIM de Gobiernos Latinoamericanos, o como muchas veces lo acortamos, la Red BIM GovLatam. Y además soy directora ejecutiva del Plan BIM de Corfo de Chile. Hoy día les voy a contar acerca de la Red BIM de Gobiernos Latinoamericanos y voy a partir por una línea de tiempo. Entonces, ¿cuándo parte la red? La red parte, o la idea de la red parte en 2016, y durante 2016-2017 tuvimos un trabajo liderado desde Chile para impulsar la idea de que era necesario construir o generar una red de gobiernos de nuestra región que estuvieran promoviendo BIM. Y estuvimos en ese periodo buscando una organización multinacional que pudiera darle respaldo a esta red. Esto porque la idea la aprendimos, la tomamos un poco de lo que pasaba en Europa, de lo que pasa hoy en Europa con el EU BIM Task Group. Finalmente no pudimos conseguir en un tiempo razonable una organización que le diera cabida y respaldo a la red. Por lo tanto, lo que hicimos fue empezar a organizarla de todas maneras. Y en 2018 hicimos una primera convocatoria a distintos países de la región de Latinoamérica que sabíamos que estaban impulsando el BIM desde sus gobiernos, para que pudiéramos juntarnos todos en Chile a conversar y discutir acerca de lo que estábamos haciendo, los objetivos, los focos, etc. A esa reunión llegaron 5 países: Argentina, Brasil, Chile, México y Uruguay, y en esa reunión nos dimos cuenta que teníamos mucho en común, teníamos mucho espacio para colaborar, muy relacionado con el tema que nos convoca hoy también en este evento, que es que vimos que los distintos países estábamos tratando de impulsar acciones motivados por razones comunes y motivados en alcanzar metas que eran comunes a los distintos países. Por lo tanto, había un gran valor en colaborar y en empezar a aprender unos de otros. Entonces, ese fue el punto de partida de nuestra red en 2018, y desde ahí organizamos un segundo encuentro, ya más bien una asamblea, en Brasil. A esa asamblea se unieron, además de los 5 países originales, 2 países más, Colombia y Costa Rica. Empezamos a trabajar en una propuesta en conjunto con el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo para conseguir financiamiento y formalizar nuestra red. En 2019 conseguimos este financiamiento, este bien público regional, desde el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo. Tuvimos un tercer encuentro al cual se sumó un 8º país, Perú. Un cuarto encuentro, todos estos en ese momento presenciales, en Argentina, a fines del 2019, donde además pusimos en funcionamiento el reglamento de la red y ya se terminó de formalizar. En ese momento se hizo una elección de presidencia y se fijó que eso iba a funcionar todos los años. La idea era continuar con estos encuentros, porque dentro de estos encuentros íbamos definiendo las líneas de acción, pero bueno, como todos saben, pasó el 2020 y la pandemia, y rápidamente virtualizamos todo el trabajo en conjunto, la colaboración, cosa que ha funcionado bastante bien, y por lo tanto 2020 tuvimos nuestros 2 encuentros, pero virtualmente, y empezamos un trabajo de grupos, que les voy a contar un poquito más adelante cómo ha funcionado o cuáles son los temas que estamos viendo, pero dentro de estos 8 países tenemos subgrupos que están enfocados en distintos temas clave para la red y para los países que la conforman. Tuvimos además, dentro del 2020, una segunda elección de presidencia, y 2021, en este año, estamos ya funcionando con los grupos de trabajo a plena capacidad. Estamos trabajando en tener una web donde disponibilizar información. Estamos trabajando en los primeros pasos de distintas guías y también van a haber algunos estudios de temas que les voy a contar. Y bueno, y lo que tenemos hasta ahora, este timeline, es al 2022, que esperamos publicar una guía que va a ser como el handbook de estrategias de la región, similar a lo que publicó en su momento el BIM Task Group sobre las estrategias de implementación de BIM en la Comunidad Europea. El 2022 se termina el financiamiento del BIM público regional, pero eso no significa que la red se acabe, la red continúa y esperamos que cada vez con más países. La red, como les decía, está conformada por 8 países: Argentina, Brasil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, México, Perú y Uruguay. Y el objetivo principal es este que ven en pantalla, es aumentar la productividad de la industria de la construcción entre los distintos países a través de promover la transformación digital, acelerando la implementación de BIM en los programas nacionales, a través de conseguir un trabajo colaborativo que promueva que generemos lineamientos comunes y que además esto favorezca el intercambio tanto de conocimiento como comercial en nuestra región. La presidencia, como les decía, se eligió en 2020, salió Chile elegido como la presidencia, y en 2021 fuimos reelegidos en este cargo. Y bueno, y les pongo aquí también nuestras redes. Hoy día tenemos una web, tenemos distintas redes sociales y distintos canales donde pueden ir viendo nuestra información. Después, si vamos a cuáles son los objetivos específicos a los que nos estamos enfocando dentro de la red, primero está promover el aprendizaje sobre la implementación de BIM entre los países miembros. Obviamente ahí está compartir la experiencia de esta implementación que ha tenido cada uno de los países para lograr acelerar los procesos de cada uno de nosotros. Otro objetivo específico es difundir los beneficios del BIM, especialmente con el foco en conseguir convencer a los tomadores de decisión de cada uno de nuestros países, las autoridades que finalmente son los que definen y deciden cómo se construyen o cómo se definen los planes de promoción de BIM desde los distintos estados, la idea es, a través del conocimiento de la red, lograr ayudar a los distintos países a convencer a esos tomadores de decisiones y a esas autoridades del valor de hacer esto para el país y principalmente pensando en focos de productividad para los países. Otro objetivo específico es acordar una base común de conceptos que nos permita generar un alineamiento regional respecto de la adopción o de la creación de distintos estándares y protocolos. La idea aquí es tener lineamientos mínimos que podamos compartir entre los países respecto de estándares. También otro objetivo es promover el uso de BIM y de herramientas, especialmente con un foco en la transparencia y la trazabilidad de las decisiones en los proyectos públicos. Y finalmente todo esto está enfocado a maximizar los recursos de cada uno de nuestros países, que está enfocado en generar esta implementación a través de compartir conocimiento entre los países. Creemos que si compartimos las experiencias, como todos sabemos, los recursos de los programas de Estado siempre son limitados y por lo tanto no queremos ir repitiendo en cada uno de los países las mismas pruebas, los mismos aprendizajes. Si un país ya aprendió sobre qué acciones pueden ser más beneficiosas que otras, cuáles caminos pueden ser más fáciles o más efectivos, bueno, ese aprendizaje, la idea es que sirva para que los otros países miembros de la red puedan avanzar más rápido, sin tener que dar también todos los pasos. Como les contaba en la línea de tiempo, la red está financiada por 3 años por el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo y obviamente también por los países miembros. Respecto de estandarización, aquí hay un foco que está, y traje aquí de nuevo el objetivo principal que reúne a la red, que tiene que ver con la productividad. Y si se fijan aquí, está como uno de los temas clave la generación de lineamientos comunes entre los países. Estos lineamientos comunes justamente se refieren a estándares, están basados en la serie de estándares de la ISO y también en otras normas, guías, protocolos internacionales que hemos ido tomando los distintos países. La idea es que podamos, como les decía antes, generar lineamientos comunes que sean adoptados por los distintos países y que eso permita que el entendimiento de BIM en la región sea un entendimiento común y además un entendimiento alineado a nivel internacional. No queremos que nuestra red quede y nuestros países queden con un BIM que es solo apropiado o aplicable a Latinoamérica. Obviamente necesitamos tomar las líneas comunes internacionales y ver qué partes de ellas, qué acciones de ellas tienen que ser adaptadas específicamente a la economía, a la idiosincrasia, a las organizaciones que tenemos en nuestra región, pero siempre quedando conectados con cómo el BIM se está impulsando a nivel internacional, porque entendemos que eso obviamente favorece, de nuevo, el intercambio, como lo dice nuestro objetivo, tanto a nivel de conocimientos como a nivel comercial. Y por eso para nosotros ser parte del Global Network y del Global Summit es importante porque nos interesa mostrar lo que estamos haciendo desde Latinoamérica y quedar alineados a lo que está pasando a nivel internacional. ¿Qué estamos haciendo respecto de esos temas? Bueno, tenemos distintos grupos de trabajo conformados por subconjuntos de nuestros países y estamos trabajando en varios temas. Aquí traje, en este slide están solo los temas que tienen que ver con más enfocados a estándares, después les voy a mencionar otros, pero aquí tenemos 3 grupos que están enfocados en estos temas. Handbook y estrategias, hay otro grupo de estándares y hay otro grupo de indicadores. Y los grupos trabajan coordinadamente o alineadamente y esperamos que dentro de este año y el próximo podamos publicar información justamente acerca de lo que se ha avanzado en la región, cuáles son los lineamientos que ya existen comunes y más adelante cuáles son los lineamientos que se van a definir en conjunto. Por otra parte, ¿qué está pasando en la región respecto de la ISO? Si se fijan, los 8 países de nuestra región, de nuestra red, están en proceso o ya tienen adoptada la norma ISO 19650 como parte de sus normas nacionales. Aquí estamos hablando obviamente de las normas ISO 19650 que están publicadas a la fecha, y obviamente también se está trabajando en traducciones o en ser parte de comités espejo de las normas ISO 19650 que están en desarrollo. Además de eso, cada uno de los países, como les decía, cada uno de los países ha visto la necesidad también de tomar los lineamientos y los protocolos internacionales y ver cómo estos también requieren una cierta bajada al nivel nacional, a cómo se hacen las cosas en cada uno de nuestros países. Y por lo tanto hay una serie de documentos, ya sean estándares, que están publicando los países, u otros tipos de guías, sobre todo términos de referencia, Employers Information Requirements, alineados a los estándares internacionales, pero también que toman el cómo se hacen las cosas dentro de cada uno de nuestros países. Entonces, si se fijan, los 8 países están trabajando en documentos o ya tienen publicados documentos de este tipo. Finalmente, ¿cómo funciona nuestra red? Nuestra red funciona, como les decía, principalmente hay una estructura, hay un consejo directivo, hay una presidencia, pero principalmente el corazón del trabajo está dentro de estos grupos de trabajo, y los grupos de trabajo están enfocados en algunos temas que ya les mostré. Hay un grupo que está enfocado en ver cuáles son las estrategias que han tomado nuestros países, qué puntos tienen en común y qué diferencias tienen, y ver cómo eso se refleja en un manual que vaya mostrando esas similitudes y diferencias, y pueda servir también para otros países de la región o de fuera de la región para usar como guía, ejemplo de cómo avanzar. También hay un grupo de estándares que justamente está analizando estándares internacionales y estándares locales. Hay un grupo de capacitación, un grupo de interacción con otras redes públicas que justamente tiene que ver con lo que pasa hoy día en la Global Network y cómo nuestra red se interactúa con eso. También estamos trabajando en cómo interactuar con redes privadas y en las comunicaciones. Y para este año tenemos 3 grupos nuevos: indicadores, propiedad intelectual y tecnologías, que son los temas que queremos estar discutiendo este año. Y con eso termino la presentación. Muchas gracias por escucharme. Dejo aquí las redes sociales de nuevo. Muchas gracias.
Thanks, Carolina. That was, wow, there was so much in there. There was such a lot of material and thinking, and it really, to me, shows how far Latin America has progressed in such a short space of time, really. And I think a large function of that, a large part of that, has really been down to that amazing collaboration within the Red Latam network. So thank you for your presentation, and look forward to talking after our next presentation. Our next presentation, I'm really delighted to introduce Claudia Soasnavar, who will be presenting from the Inter-American Development Bank. So Claudia, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. As I'm doing this live, I just wanted to confirm everyone's being able to see my screen.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Adam, and all the organizers for having us here at this pre-event series. My name is Claudia Soasnavar. I work for the Inter-American Development Bank. For those who don't know the institution, we are a multilateral bank. We work financing and giving technical assistance to Latin American governments. We also have financing directed to the private sector of the region. And there's many sectors in which we work. I specifically work on the division involving competitiveness, technology, and innovation. So the way we have come into working with BIM has been a product of looking mostly at the situation of productivity in the region, specifically in the construction sector. We have been working and supporting BIM development in the region since 2018. And this came, as I was saying, from a reflection of how we could confront the productivity gaps in the sector, and how the public sector could actually benefit from efficiency gains and other benefits related to transparency and sustainability. So we started working, first of all, in developing a few network projects, some macro projects. We have been supporting specific Latin American governments in rolling out their national strategies. For instance, we have worked with Costa Rica in the development of their BIM national strategy, which is currently being rolled out. As Carolina just said before me, Carolina Soto, we have also been supporting the launching of the regional government, the regional network for governments working with BIM in Latin America and the Caribbean, which, as you have heard, has grown in outreach and already is very active in the region. And we are also supporting governments when they are interested in piloting BIM in their projects. So it's not only the support for the national strategy, but we see the support for pilots as a way to demonstrate effects, having a demonstrative effect for BIM usage in each country. So we are working with different pilots in countries such as Uruguay and Argentina as part of the support efforts we're doing. We also believe that talent development is basically the cornerstone of digital adoption and usage. and we are convinced that this is the case for BIM too. So initiatives like Chile's BIM e-learning course that has been recently launched, also very successfully, is part of the type of interventions we do to support this in the region. But then we are also applying BIM for IDB projects, IDB finance projects. So whenever there's an interest of a government that will come to IDB to ask for financing, we can offer the chance of utilizing, of using BIM in the design and construction mostly of some projects. We are working with IDB funded projects in several sectors and countries. We are working in the road, in a couple of roads in Costa Rica, using BIM, with water projects in Paraguay, with hospital design and building in El Salvador and Bolivia, and also with education and education building in Uruguay. All these projects have been are ongoing right now. They are mostly focused on the design and construction phases, and we haven't been able to pilot operation and maintenance just yet. So how do we approach standards at IDB? We definitely are promoting international open standards for BIM. As you know, we have IDB procurement policies, which promote transparency and open access of all procurement and investments done by IDB. But we will work specifically with regards to BIM to help governments train their teams and incorporate BIM in the tender documents in such a way that we ensure interoperability and compliance with international standards. So what we have been working on is a methodology that's been inspired by Chile's very successful efforts to support government implementation of BIM. We are doing very intensive work with all the pilots that I told you about in the slide before. This has come to a point where we are now developing a guide for BIM pilots for public sector agencies, and we hope that it will be published later this year. And the idea is to be able not only to share the standards, but also to share the how-to. How do you actually train your people and in the government offices? How do you incorporate BIM from the beginning of the process of design of a project and all the way down to its implementation and supervision? We are excited, and we think that this document will be very useful not only for IDB specialists or multilateral specialists that are involved in financing of public sector construction projects, but also for our public counterparts in the Latin American governments themselves. Until now, IDB doesn't have an internal formal guideline on how to implement BIM at the corporate level. But what we have implemented and we think is very useful is sort of an informal exchange. So we have created a network of all the different teams from different sectors in different countries that are working with BIM projects. And we have created a knowledge exchange network, internal network, which we believe is being very useful to accelerate the exchange of learning by doing as we go advancing, progressing in the implementation of BIM at the corporate level. And finally, we have been very active in doing a lot of work with awareness raising and capacity building at the corporate level, but also at the country level. And we are confident that more countries are going to be joining these efforts, not only at the project level, but also with regards to national BIM strategies. What are we working on and what are we going to keep on working on? Right now, as I was saying, we have different countries at different BIM maturity stages. So we work with the region as a whole. We're going to keep on working with these countries. We see increased interest, for instance, from Central American countries, which have not been able to join the regional network yet. And we think that we are going to put a lot of effort in trying to have these countries catch up with the rest of the region. We are for sure going to keep on working with the network, with the network presented by Carolina. We believe in regional collaboration as part of our de facto mission. And we think that this is going to accelerate the adoption of BIM throughout Latin America. And then we have identified a few knowledge gaps, which we believe could be useful in this mission of promoting BIM adoption across the region. We financed the first survey on BIM usage in the region with comparable data among countries, which was missing. We are now doing some work on measuring impact of BIM in transparency. And in Latin America, the objective of transparency is very important in having governments decide to work with BIM. But it's always useful to be able to convince decision makers to show some impact data. So we're putting a lot of effort into that. And in general, into measuring BIM performance. So we're working with the regional network of Latin American governments in a document that will be able to, we hope, shed some light on some of the impacts of BIM on different outcome indicators, and also to use a methodology for measuring this impact that then can then be used in the region in different countries. Finally, as I was saying, we are working with BIM from IDB in IDB financed projects. We're going to keep on working on this. We're going to keep learning and experimenting, and again, measuring results on this are key. So there's a few impact evaluations that are going to be happening in the next year or so that will be able to help with these. And what do we see as challenges and future challenges and areas of work? Well, we in Latin America, I think we have an issue with sustainability of long-term sustainability of government programs. So it's very important to help the countries to sustain in time BIM efforts. As we all know, this is not a short-term effort, it's a long-term effort, and that means there's going to be different governments and different elections in the way and pandemics in the way. We think that the awareness raising effort, all this knowledge and impact evaluation has to be put to good use in helping countries sustain the BIM efforts over time and convincing policymakers that the effort is really worth their while. Also, we have some countries that are still in the more intermediate phases of development. So they are in the process of scaling up national programs, and we think this is going to be a big part of our work going forward too. I already talked about impact of BIM. We're specifically focusing on going forward on sustainability and green recovery, the green BIM aspect, and we're going to be doing some work on that. And finally, we have developed some initial projects on SME adoption of BIM, but our intention is to really build up on this going forward. As IDB, we have a very close working relationship with innovation agencies and SME development agencies all across the region, and we believe that the combination of roles between an innovation and SME development agencies and the BIM programs, national programs, is going to be particularly fruitful. And this is an area of work we are thinking of attending going forward. So thank you again for having me here. I look forward to answering any questions and insights on the presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Claudia. That was super comprehensive, and clearly you've got one or two things going on in the IDB in the bank there. If I could ask all of the speakers to turn on their cameras, and we'll have a few questions and a few conversations around these topics. Thanks again for your presentations. That was really helpful and comprehensive. Nihal, you kicked us off, so I think that I'll ask you a question first of all. You mentioned about the aspiration. You talked about the goals that you have for your initiative, and you also talked about the importance of people and places. So I wanted to ask you a question about this in relation to what is it that you see then as the long-term outcomes for your efforts? Where do you think this could lead to, and how will it ultimately help the UN Ops and the countries that you partner with?
Thank you, Adam, for the question. Very important question. I might say that in UN Ops, in all our projects, sustainability is at the core. Sustainability, economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. So when we introduce or try to introduce innovation and technology in our projects, not only in infrastructure projects, but all the projects that we implement, plan and implement, and support our partners, the end goal is to increase their capacities and increase transparency and increase the effectiveness, not only of the projects themselves, but increase the capacities of the partners to choose the right projects, considering the end goal. That is at the core of what we call the fair public management also. By increasing the transparency, we reduce the gap, the difference of all people, of all population, not only in LCR and in our region, Latin America, the Caribbean, but globally. So we intend to reduce the gap and provide access to all people and increase the opportunity to improve their lives at the end of the day. Because we see infrastructure not only as an asset, but we see it as a mean to provide services. So at the end of the day, if by using innovation and technology to increase the efficiency and the effectiveness of the projects, we will provide all people a better chance to improve their lives, and for the countries to improve their own status and conditions.
That was really clear. Absolutely. So it is about building capacity. It is about including people and different types of organizations as well. Nihal, I'd like to come back to you, but I think probably come back in a moment on that really interesting point you mentioned, that you're running surveys around the capacity of the local market so that you avoid discrimination, so that you avoid leaving people behind. But if I could come back to you on this point, it's a really interesting point. And maybe Electra, if I could turn to you with a related question, which did come through on our Slido chat, which was around the involvement of SMEs and what is it that you perceive the European Commission is doing and can do to ensure that SMEs are involved in this digital transformation?
Thank you, Adam, and to the audience, of course. I think it's an excellent question. Indeed, the role of the public sector, and especially an institution as the European Commission, is to make sure that the digital transformation happens in fair terms. And construction is a sector where digitalization is to happen in fair terms, and specifically for the over 97% of SMEs that it has. So we tried to support SMEs with horizontal measures, such as the setup of digital innovation hubs that was happening in the Digital Euro program of the previous period and is going to continue happening in the next programming period. The digital innovation hubs are centers where SMEs can experiment with digital technologies. They can discuss about tailor-made solutions to the services that they offer, and they can also link with training providers. In addition to that, we have started developing a tool specifically for SMEs that they can perform their own self-assessment and see their readiness for BIM, not only in terms of technological capacity, but also about soft skills and managerial skills in order to uptake BIM. So these are, I would say, the most important initiatives. But apart from that, we make sure that in larger initiatives, we include SMEs and their voices together with other industrial players. So any decision taken can involve their perspective.
Thanks, Electra. Yeah, absolutely. And I know the European Commission has been incredibly successful and a great partner, I would say, to both industry and to governments in helping to bring both sides of the sector together, and as you said, not leaving people behind. So tremendous work there, well done. And a related question, I think, to that diversity point, maybe Carolina, if I could come to you, is around diversity of, not only diversity of markets, but diversity levels across countries. So how do you in Latin America manage that diversity across the whole region? It's a huge region, of course, a huge population, incredibly diverse. You don't have 25 languages like the European region, but you still got tremendous diversity. So how have you managed that and resolved that difference?
Yes, well, thank you, Adam, for the question. It's a great question because it's something that it's at the same time a challenge, but also is the great thing about having a collaboration like the Red BIM Gov Latam, because as you say, we don't have a lot of languages for now. We only have 2 languages in the countries that are in our network, which, by the way, I wanted to say it's open to receive the other countries of our region. We only have 8 now because we only have 8 that have approached us and that have something, a program, a BIM program from their own governments going on. But I just wanted to do that parenthesis because there may be people from other parts of our region who are listening and are asking why they're not here. You're all invited to be a part of it. So the thing about our group is that even if we have 2 languages right now, we even that is a thing because we don't name things. Even if the 7 countries that speak Spanish, we all name things in a different way. So it's not really the same language. It's different degrees of the same language, and of course different ways in which things are done. So we have a common history. You have common things, but we also have different timelines, different kinds of internal regulations, governments, etc. So there's a balance that we need to reach and that we're always looking to achieve in every action that we propose and that we take in our network. And it means that we need to be very inclusive and we need to have a lot of space for discussion. So no country feels that they're being imposed a way that things should be done by the other countries. We have countries that started a few years ago in their BIM progress and their BIM programs. We have countries that have more recently started. So we are always trying to achieve a balance, to be inclusive, to have the experience of the countries that are going maybe faster or started first, to be useful for the countries that started later or have less experience or have done less things. But we're also careful that those experiences should also be heard, because there's something to learn about from every experience of BIM. It's not always like the one is going faster or the one that is done more is the better, and we should all just do that, because there's things to learn in the ones that have done a longer route or a slower route or things in a different way. But it's a challenge, and every meeting and every action, we're trying to balance that and be very careful about being inclusive and not trying to create a recipe for everyone, because that we know it's not going to work. We need to have common things, but at the same time be respectful of the differences.
If I could take your cooking analogy with recipes, it sounds like what you're saying is maybe the recipes are slightly different, but they tend to be similar ingredients.
Yeah. That is a good way to pose it. Yes.
Hey, well, we're learning here, aren't we? So this is good. Great. Claudia, a related question. In fact, there was some interest in what you were saying. There was so much in all of your presentations, by the way. I hope we're okay to go for another hour or so, if that's okay with it. I'm joking. Sorry, that was a joke. But Claudia, there was a lot of interest in what you were saying about outcomes. There's a lack of evidence, isn't there? There's a lack of tangible evidence sometimes in terms of quantification of some of the benefits at a project level or at a project an organization level. And that's a really interesting topic. I don't know if you could say anything else about one of the questions I think I saw was about, well, when's it going to be available, these results? Could you talk a little bit about your survey, your study, and how you're doing it, what indicators, what factors, and as I said, there's interest in when it will be published as well.
Yes, thank you, Adam. And I know this is a topic very close to your heart. So we do think that that there is not a lack of evidence. I wouldn't say that in general, but I would say a lack of comparable and relatable evidence for the realities of what we're approaching and developing in BIM usage in Latin America. The diversity of sectors, of applications, and of capacities of both on the government side and on the construction sector side mean that we have not only called things differently, but we measure things very differently. So what we are attempting to do is try to give some economic rigorousness into a couple of impact evaluations. So there's one right now going on in Costa Rica, which we are working on. I mentioned as part of our pilots in the transport sector, specifically in road construction. And although I know this is not a perfect comparison, but we are trying to, on the same road, take two different parts of the road that are being constructed, and one using BIM and one without BIM, sort of to get the best possible control group in order to be able to measure the impact of BIM usage in terms of cost reductions, of clashes, and such. And we think that the measure of the performance measures we get out of this are going to be useful, but probably are going to be useful for the road transport sector. So then we are also in discussions with the government in Uruguay. They also have a program that they are building something similar to school buildings, but they are in charge of building many of these same buildings across the country, and they are willing to do a comparison also with and without BIM. So that I think will give us the best possible comparison that we can, because I think that the attribution of the benefits of BIM usage is the issue here when we talk about this sort of evaluations. So what we are also doing on top of this, in addition to these two specific impact evaluation projects, we are trying to come up with some sort of methodology to be able to give some common measurement outcomes for BIM usage in the region. And we are really just starting with this, with an international firm doing this work. So I'm hoping we are able to show some results later in the year. But I think it's because of the diversity of sectors and types of construction projects. There's an initial part, a conceptual part that's going to be the hardest one to come up with. And then we have some pilots that are going to be applying this methodology later in the year. So we hope to maybe the next global meeting to be able to come with some results.
Thanks, Claudia. That's really, really helpful. And actually, Electra, I know that connects very closely to work that you're doing, of course, in the European Commission to create a cost benefits methodology. I don't know if you're able to say anything about when that will be available.
Yes, thank you, Adam. And what a great connection of putting us together with Claudia. I didn't know about her initiative, but for sure I will reach to her. Yes, indeed, we had this problem that many public administrations were asking, why should they introduce BIM to my project? What will be the benefits? And we have global figures. We know that adoption of BIM might save this amount of money in the global economy for construction, but what happens when you build indeed a school, when you build a bridge? So this was an idea that was generated together with the member states, the EU BIM task group, of developing a tool to conduct cost-benefit analysis for the use of BIM in individual projects. So now we are in the course of this work that started in September. We will be able to publish the results in May. Together with consultants, we looked into existing literature, and we asked the public procurers across Europe what they perceive as the benefits and what they perceive as the costs, because it's not only monetary, but sometimes it's also environmental or social. We set up indicators, and currently we are testing this model against certain case studies of projects that either didn't use BIM, but they could use BIM, or that they used BIM of a certain level of maturity, and we're trying to see what would be the cost if they raise this level of maturity. So very happy to share with the panel and the global network the findings of this work, yes, around May, I hope.
Great, thanks, Electra. I was just going to say, it sounds like we need a global network to connect all of these different things together. You made it too easy for me to make this. Nihal, to pick up Electra's point, which is really clearly made, that the value is more than just economic, and I think everybody has spoken to that as well, but it's just in my mind from what Electra said. Could you make a comment? I know you mentioned the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Could you again just do a quick reintroduction of what that is, and then explain the relevance of this agenda to the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, thank you, Adam. Well, the Sustainable Development Goals, commonly known as SDGs, is basically a collection of 17 high-level goals, each one comprised by specific tasks created by the UN and the member states of the UN in order to improve the conditions of living, basically, by 2030. So, for example, one of the SDGs are water and sanitation. Another one is to reduce poverty. Another one is about infrastructure. And this is very important because we can somehow connect all the outputs of both the public implemented projects, not only infrastructure projects, but technology projects also, social projects and so forth. The specific outputs of each project to a specific task or target within the SDGs. And what is, I might say, astonishing or mind-blowing is that infrastructure, although infrastructure is SDG 9, is one of the targets, infrastructure is connected to all of the SDGs somehow or another. Why? Because infrastructure is at the core of the built environment, is at the core of society, is at the core of the services provided to the people. So in that sense, we have, you might say, two types of infrastructure. Network is infrastructure, which is roads, transportation, water distribution, electricity, communications, and so forth. And non-network infrastructure, which are basically the buildings that offer the services to the people, schools, hospitals, clinics, rule of law infrastructure, and so forth. So if we see the buildings or the infrastructure outputs of each project as an individual asset, we lose the opportunity to aspire to improve and achieve better outcomes in the long run. So in the UN, what we do, our view is to see infrastructure as a network of networks, basically. So instead of thinking about the bridge, instead of thinking about the school, we think about the services and what is the ultimate purpose of that infrastructure output. And of course, that is at the very end of the value chain, and not least important. But when we plan projects, we try to incorporate that long-term vision from the beginning. And as I mentioned, if by using technology, BIM, to incorporate data, not only for planning of the project itself, but for long-term planning at national level, to better understand how the infrastructure of a particular city, of a particular country is interconnected, and where are the gaps, then we can translate that and reflect it in a project dossier, in a project portfolio, thinking short-term, medium-term, long-term. I'm sure everybody here has heard about this, but the SDGs at the end of the day provide us a high-level guide on which is the way, what are the priorities, how can we better impact our world that we share in a better way. Back to you, Adam. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
More than answered. Thanks, Nihal. And actually, we've been having a poll running as well in the background on Slido, as we mentioned, and the audience also fully agrees with your answer, which is basically the society effectively benefits. Ultimately, they're the largest beneficiary of this. We are, of course, all part of that value chain, but society is the overall beneficiary through delivering things better. So exactly what you were saying there, Nihal. Okay, I think we're going to have to pause it there until next Wednesday, until the 17th, which is the launch of the Global BIM Network. I want to thank our fantastic speakers for your comments, for your time, your energy, and your passion for this topic. So thank you, Electra, for Claudia, Nihal, and Carolina. We look forward to seeing you next week as well on Wednesday. So again, thanks so much for your contribution. So back to you, the audience. We hope you found this session useful, interesting, informative, and we do hope that you can join us on the 17th for the launch of the Global BIM Network, which is when we are going to be presenting this topic and launching our global collaboration. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam and all.
Bye-bye.